Hello all. You have been cruising through the module of access to justice. I had already done many modules relating to access to justice for the needy persons like women, children, as well as laborers, persons with disability. Today we are going to talk about one more person who is in need of access to justice, that is victims. Myself, Dr. B.S. Patil, Assistant Professor at V.M. Salgaonkar College of Law, Goa. I would be dealing with this module of access to justice and victims. When we talk about victims, this part of the crime, that is, a crime has two parts, that is offender and the victim, and the whole criminal justice system that is designed in India is talking about rights of accused person, rights of an offender, rights of a convicted person, prisoner. But where is the other part of it? Rights of the victims. The higher crime rate that exists in India is one of the reasons why there is lesser conviction rate, and there is again another reason, important reason to be taken into consideration is the initial focus of all the criminologists were relating to rights of accused persons. The thing which was missing in all this discussion was reparation, that is compensation for the victims, and that is one of the reasons why the criminal justice system is supposed to be considered to be incomplete system. In a crime, the victim's life gets destroyed. When I say victim here, I am considering the dependents of the actual victim of the crime. The higher rate of acquittal is another kind of a crime that is committed against the victim. So therefore, there is a debate that is going on, that is regarding compensating the victims of the crime. The debate started at the international level. India is part of it, and the compensatory jurisprudence was developed in USA, UK, Australia, New Zealand. There are many other countries which have brought up this compensatory jurisprudence into picture. In addition to this, the United Nations organization as an international community, they came up with a declaration in the year 1985, which I fondly call it as a Magna Carta of victims' rights. That is, Declaration of Basic Principles of Justice for Victims and Abuse of Power, 1985. So this, in addition to this declaration, in 1997, we had right of reparation for victims of human rights violation. 1999, there was a handbook on justice for victims. Then in the year 2006, United Nations Convention on Justice and Support for Victims of Crime and Abuse of Power. So these were the major contributions by the international community on this. The United Nations Congress made a major contribution on Declaration of Victims' Rights when they did extensive study on prevention of crime and treatment of offender. Coming back to the contribution of the United Nations, that is the first declaration which I mentioned, that is the 1985 declaration. That declaration specifically was concerned with the societal response to the needs of the victim. So society is responding to the needs of the accused. Now there is a need for the same society, including the state, need to respond to the needs of the victim. The declaration had two focal areas. One is victims of crime. The victims of crime, again we are talking about the general IPC sections. The second one is victims of abuse of power, where state excesses, the officer of a state who exceeds his power and consequently victimizes a private person, an individual, that is considered as the second part of it. The declaration has got four important aspects, that is access to justice and fair treatment, restitution, compensation and assistance. So when we talk about access to justice and fair treatment, we are talking about access to mechanism of justice and prompt redress to the victim. Right to be informed about victims' rights, That's another important aspect under access to justice. Right to proper assistance throughout the legal process. Now, when we talk about right to proper assistance, already there is a provision that has been created. A department of prosecution is established to assist the victims. But in addition to that, other additional assistance that is required for victims, that should be provided. Right to protection of privacy and safety. This is another important aspect under access to justice provision. Restitution, that is the second aspect of declaration, that is return of property, if at all the property is being taken away in a process of commission of crime. Payment for harm or the loss caused. So this is again in the form of compensation. Here we are talking about two aspects. One, compensation by the offender. The other one is compensation by the state. Compensation by the state, I think it should provide in both the cases where victim of a crime is there for the failure to avoid the crime. Second one is where there is abuse of power by the state, where public officials, other agents violate and commit crime against an individual. There the compensation should be provided by the state. So in both the situations, state should step in and compensate the victim. Third is compensation, the state role. We need the state to establish a national funds. The declaration insists that national funds should be constituted and state should pay based on the requirements under that national fund scheme. Assistance, it's an interesting thing. All these times state was supposed to provide legal assistance. Now we are talking about materials like legal assistance, psychological, social assistance. All these things should be provided by the state, and all the officials of the state must be properly trained in this regard.